Well, a memory of when things were fun and much more cool came up in a conversation where somebody was talking about an anti-hero, and I was like, yeah, unfortunately, unless you're going for old independent movies, mostly the 90s and 2000s or something, or writing, like actually written characters, you're just simply not going to find anti-heroes well done anymore, because the present generation they just don't know. They don't read books that much. They don't read short stories. They wouldn't know. And it's also, I couldn't say it, but oh wow, look at how they're all hunkering down in the grasses there, trying not to get swept down the stream in the slough. The mighty ducks. But so I was like, it suddenly hit me the way that this person thought, that I was like, oh, I know some anti-hero characters you would love. And then one of the ones was Aeon Flux. Do you all remember Aeon Flux? Like, one of the best female sci-fi characters ever written since, well, Motoko Kusanagi, who I was like, that's the other kind of anti-hero person. But then when I thought about it, I'm like, no. The best anti-hero, like if women want to see a well-done female anti-hero later on, then it's Aeon Flux. And now, if there's anybody who you're not familiar, Aeon Flux. So she's so her character dies every single episode, but she's sort of this spy slash a woman just trying to cause problems. But her love interest is an extremely wealthy man who is definitely kind of a super villain character, except now and then you find out his sort of villainous plan actually is meant to help somebody. And so Aeon will come through and ruin his plan, only to find out that what he was up to, he wasn't up to an evil plot at all. So Aeon Flux, one of the best parts about Aeon Flux is that it introduced the very concept of the difference between men and women, and in science fiction. That he is the force of order. And that literally, like, it opens, eventually the cartoon opens, and there's like audio overlay, and he's talking about, that he is a force for order. And that, oh my gosh, I wish I could remember her part of the dialogue. I'd have to watch it again. I'll have to watch it again. But Aeon Flux was one of the best pieces of animation ever done in American cartoons. Its writing was not very complicated, but everything was in the scene. There was nothing ever explained, like to the point where, the show barely made sense to people who weren't fans, because the character died every single episode. And there was no explanation of who she was. Like, you never really knew who she was, where her origins were from. And so I was like thinking about it. I'm like, no, that it comes down to, it's Motoko Kusanagi, Aeon Flux, and Faye Valentine. They are pretty much the best anti-heroes I've seen written during most of my life. And like, Faye Valentine was so well written that when you get to the episodes of her backstory, one, it's incredibly well done. But then the best thing about Faye Valentine is her backstory is so well done. It is so beautifully tragic that you almost can't help but, when you think back to it, this sort of immense amount of sadness. When you finally figure out what the deal is with Faye Valentine, because she doesn't even know That's one of the key things. It's one of these characters, the classic, a woman who has amnesia, the amnesiac female. That's a classic anti-hero for women, is the amnesiac, and that she doesn't know her history, and her history is intrinsically tied to the adventure, making her the anti-hero. It's a world of madness because she doesn't remember who she is, but the world operates in a way that she fits in someplace and she has to find out where. Yeah, now I'm thinking about, wow, those were, we just aren't doing this anymore. Now maybe there's live action shows that are like this, but I mean, it's one of these things of why watch live action? I really don't get this fixation Americans have on live action, when obviously the Japanese have shown Americans since the 1980s that animation, when it comes to sci-fi and fantasy, animation is where it's at. There's only been a handful, like when it comes to fantasy, like quite literally a handful of movies that have ever pulled it off in live action, ever, and almost entirely by the same person. And that's the Lord of the Rings series. There's nothing like Dungeons and Dragons has never successfully pulled off live action that anybody talks about, anybody wants to see. Just nobody cares. It's just, I know that, oh no, they came out with a movie that was like kind of a spoof, and it was kind of dumb. All of it is dumb. All of this is stupid now because nobody really wants to tell a good fantasy story, and these are also a lot of people who they obviously there isn't the real love, the real fan love for it, because what would have happened if there was real fan love for Dungeons and Dragons from the creative end? If the people who owned the IP didn't hate their fans and weren't losers, what they would do is they would do a Forgotten Realms like mini-series, and then that would branch into, you would have the various characters or whatever. But I mean, you could do a Forgotten Realms thing, and the Forgotten Realms, you could do this for eras. There's entire histories in Dungeons and Dragons and in the Forgotten Realms. And the important part of the Forgotten Realms is that it introduces fantasy concepts from East Asian myth and lore, loosely, but still, it's just one of these things at a certain point, like, and then and this should have already been a video game. I mean, it's this Forgotten Realms should have been a video game a long time ago that I'm like constantly watching people play, but no, it's not going to happen either, because you see, video games are for boys, like Dungeons and Dragons is for boys, because boys like that kind of thing. But everybody keeps thinking somewhere there's a girl who wants to play this. And instead, what they're really saying is there is a boy who is probably a white male who is extremely effeminate and weird and unlikable, and he wants to have the game unlikable, because then it's the way he likes it, and his mommy thinks he's special. And everything now is made so that little Braden can whatever the big name is nowadays, is it a fake Celtic name, or is it a fake phony British name, or is it just they just given up and they're just naming boys anything? They're just making up sounds like black people. So yeah, I was just thinking about that, like that Aeon Flux, like, and so then when you think about how all these series get written, once you think of Aeon Flux, you're like, wait a second, everyone's trying to be Aeon Flux. Like every single female comic book character and every single, like all of these, they're all Aeon Flux. Or they're all bad copies of well-written female characters from other series, or they're just badly written. The whole thing that people have been talking about with Ahsoka, the crossed arm smug smile thing. And the moment I saw that, I'm like, okay, are they just putting this image in over and over again? No, she hits this position all the time. And I'm just sitting there going, boom, that's it. This is crap. It's crap. It's garbage. And sure enough, they as they've gone through it, it's like, oh no, this is bad. Like, if you really like the lore, if you like the originals, if you this is just it continuing down the horrible road that these people are insisting on leaving the carcass of Star Wars. And which of course I don't mind too much, because I'm more than willing to see new and better franchises come along, because that's the way it works. That's the way it works. It's just a matter of will there be somebody in the creative world who will just yield to the fact that animation is better? Yeah, live action movies are nice, but live action thespians are just not that interesting. Thespians are just not that interesting. And so, and also often they're just not that talented, and you just can't believe that they're these characters. And so that's why I'm just like, no, that's why Ghost in the Shell is legendary. Ghost in the Shell is legendary because nobody even knows that Ghost in the Shell had a live action. Most people don't even realize Aeon Flux and Ghost in the Shell. Most people don't know it had a live action. I remember the one that I pointed out to this person was the French Nikita, the first true La Femme Nikita, which was the best. The French version was the best, and yeah. And so this is, it's just some thoughts I was having. All right, so I've got some chores to do. I'm hoping this little touch of coffee will help. Whew, boy, waking up at like 4:30 to 5 in the morning, like by the time you get to like the afternoon, you're like, okay, all right, banks are being seized. All right, let's take a look. Johnny Bravo's channel, J Bravo. Peace.